supporting Lantern Light. This is just a map of all the different places that Baptist Mission Australia are focused in. So they, a number of years back, they decided there's certain areas that they wanted to be a focus of the Baptists here in Australia. And so all those little dots are the main areas of missionaries where that they support, or we have missionaries that go out to, or some of them that come from Australia go over to support. And you can see Thailand there in the group of the four. So this is where Lantern Light is. And Lantern Light works a lot with Myanmar people who have come over as refugees. And if you remember in the video that we watched earlier, how the young man actually became a citizen. He was able to do that. Actually, once he became a citizen, he was able to get some support from the government. And so, but many of the refugees that come over, they are not able to get citizenship, and so they get zero support, which is why Lantern Light Ministry is so important to help those people who can't get support from the government, can't afford it on their own. So that's just a little bit about what is going on. And so we're looking at what does love look like. I'm just going to read a couple passages from 1 John. Dear friends, since God so loved us, we ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us. In verse 16, and so we know that we rely on the love God has for us. God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God, and God in them. This idea that we are called to be people who love, that God is a God who loves. I don't know about you, but recognizing God's love for me is very impactful. That was one of the parts of my understanding who Jesus was and God's love for me. And when Amanda talked about communion, what Jesus did for us, all of that was because of his great love for us. And there are people all around the world, and what one of their big needs is to know that somebody loves them, somebody cares for them. And so the missionaries that go out, and they are able to love by helping them with education, helping health needs, helping food, all the things that these videos show. But all by showing that love is to tell them about the love of God and what he has for them. And as God's people, how are we to love? We're supposed to love with Christ-like love, right? So love with Christ-like love. And so that's something that we can do. The passage that Joe read earlier from Philippians 2 says, therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of mind. This idea we are supposed to be like-minded with Christ and what he has done, and follow the example that Christ has set for us. So we are called to imitate his love. And so when we talk about his love, what does that love look like? What does the love of Christ look like? If we're supposed to imitate that, how are we to show that? And I had another thing I was going to share at this point, but then last night I had the privilege of talking with a pastor in Grantville. His name is Rob, and so this is something that someone shared with him, and so as pastors we tend to pass good things on and then use it, and so he's passed it. He got it, someone passed to him, I've got it passed to me. But if we think about 1 Corinthians 13, and I have written it, there's places where I've changed it where I said it, just for love, just so we can have clarity of all the times of love. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not boast. Love is not proud. Love does not dishonor others. Love is not self-seeking. Love is not easily angered. Love keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with truth. Love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. So you're probably familiar with this if you've ever been to a wedding. You know, this was brought up. This is the passage on love talking about it. There's other passages before and after, but when we read in 1 John, it told us that God is love, right? So what happens if we put God's name in there? God is patient. God is kind. God does not envy. God does not boast. God is not proud. God does not dishonor others. God is not self-seeking. God is not easily angered. God keeps no record of wrongs. Obviously, that's through Christ, once we've been set free by his blood. God does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. God always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. So if we can say that about God, we can say that about Jesus. All right? Jesus is God's son. He's come. He has God's power. That's the example he set. If you think about the life of Jesus, what did he do? He healed people. He was filled with compassion. He made time to talk with anybody, not just the leaders. He talked with the down and out, the people who most people would just walk on by. Those are the types of people he loved and cared for. And so if we are supposed to imitate Jesus, does that mean I should be able to put my name in there? Well, I don't do it as well as God does it. I don't do it as well as Jesus does it. But if I'm trying to be loving the way Christ loved, this is what my life should look like. All right? And so I'm just going to give you a second. I know my name's there. But I want you to read that in your head, but put your name. All right? I don't know about you, but when I read my name in there for the first time, and again, when I just read it then, I am aware of my own fallings, where I am not all those things all the time, or sometimes none of them very much of the time. I can see how much I still have to grow to be like Christ. Can I be patient? Of course. Can I be impatient? Talk to these people over here. Right? Can I be kind? Yeah, I can be kind, but I can also be selfish. Right? At times I don't envy, but at times I see something, oh, that would be nice to have. I wish I had that. I don't boast, but sometimes pipe my own tune, or whatever, however the saying goes. You know, so when we are asking to be like Christ, to follow his love, there is some work for me to do in my life. And as you read that, you can probably think of some things that you can work on. And so we are called to imitate Christ, imitate the example he set. And when we think about Jesus, sometimes we think, oh, God's son. But he was fully human. Yes, he was God's son. Yes, had God's power, but he did live a life as a human here, and he loved as a human. Part human, he was part God, but he loved, or fully human, fully God, but he loved as a human. He loved the people around him. And so it's not just Jesus, oh, I can't ever do that. But he set that example by living a life here, loving, caring, having compassion on people. So hopefully, as we did that, we examined ourselves. And do we see that kind of love in our lives? And again, if you're like me, yes, I can see that some of the time. And I can also see sometimes where I need to work on the love that God has given me to put it out towards the people all around me. The second thing that I think as we look through these passages is love aligns our heart with God. If we talked about earlier, God is love. We talked about how we are to be like him, but in the way God has interacted, his offering of Jesus and his offering of grace and forgiveness that he has, God is really overflowing with love. And obviously God is a God of justice. There are other sides of God as well. He's not just love, but he has all these attributes together in perfect unity. But God overflows with love for me, for you, for the people of this world. And he wants to be in that right relationship with us, which is why he sent Jesus. And so when we do that, we're aligning our hearts with God's love. Living in love helps us to deepen our relationship with God. Because really, it is out of our relationship with God that we're actually able to love the way he wants us to love. Right? It's if love, God is love, he's the one who's helping us love. Then if I draw closer to him, I learn more from him, then I'm actually able to better love. 1 John 12, we read that earlier. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us. This idea that this love that's in us, it's being complete. Love brings God glory, right? So if we behave loving towards people, and someone asks, well, why do you do that? I think one of the missionaries said, well, why are you here? They were able to share it's because of the love of Jesus that they wanted to be there and care for people. And so what did that do? That brought God the glory. It's saying, I'm just doing this because I see God and I see who he is, I see his character. And if I want to be like him and love him like he does, how can I not do that? And so when we are loving, it's going to bring God glory. Obviously, we have to participate in that by sharing, by encouraging other people, or telling other people why are the things we do that. But ultimately, it is to bring God glory. Philippians 2, 9 through 11, particularly 11, it says, every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of God the Father. In the previous passage, it's talking about how we are called to love like Christ, be like him. And all that Christ did was out of love. He went to the cross, and at the end, it is all for God's glory. All the things that he did as we worship him, honor him, as we follow his example, that we are all living like he did for the glory of the Father. We are called to live in community, right? Not, yes, we can love separately, but we are called to live in community. Paul calls us to be like-minded in our love. Philippians 2:5, in your relationships with one another, having the same mindset as Christ Jesus. We're to do this together. Right? That's why, as a church, we want to be a loving church, because we are loving each other and we're loving those outside of the church. God's Spirit helps us to do this. We know that love is one of the fruits of the Spirit, which means his Spirit is involved in molding and shaping us. And so when I go back to that activity we thought about with 1 Corinthians, the love I have so far, where I can say, yes, I've done those things well, that's because his Spirit has been at work in me. And all the places where I thought, well, I need some more work on this, that's where I need to ask his Spirit to come and help in that. God's Spirit helps us to follow after him. So these are the missionaries that were on in the story. Dima and Carolyn at the video earlier, the first missionaries of the journey. I'm just going to read a little reflection that they have of their time in Thailand. And they're reflecting on how they are called to love like God does, like Jesus does. Looking back over the years, we see that life has been a mixture of joys and sorrows, successes and failures, peace and chaos. Yet, in every season, the Lord's hand has been with us. He has never left us, not for a single moment. When we think about it, the image of the Panchi, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, our Mizo traditional hand-woven wraparound skirt comes to mind. It is beautifully made with many bright colors, yet it is the black threads woven into it that brings out its full beauty. In the same way, the dark and difficult times in our lives have become an integral part of our journey. Those very moments of brokenness have been what we felt when we felt God's love and grace the strongest. They remind us that we are nothing without Him, and that everything we have is by His mercy. As we look back, one of the greatest joys of our journey has been walking alongside our Thai brothers and sisters through both the joyful and difficult times. We've seen many of them open their hearts to Jesus and be part of forming small communities of faith. This has been a true privilege. In the early years, our Thai language was limited, and sometimes we felt hesitant to communicate with people in case we got it wrong. However, we found that people are far more gracious and understanding than we imagined. What matters is the courage to try and the willingness to connect. If we if we were talking to ourselves 15 years ago, when we were just starting out in Thailand, we would remind ourselves to always look for opportunities and be intentional, especially when it comes to sharing the gospel. We would also encourage ourselves to slow down and take time to watch, observe, and learn before making decisions or judgments. Seek to understand why people speak or act the way they do, because behind those words and actions are stories and reasons that once known will help you grow in empathy, patience, and deeper relationships. Our prayer for the local community over the next 15 years is to see people come to faith and for the Thai faith communities to be vibrant, self-governing, self-supporting, self-propagating, and theologizing. So this is what they wrote. If you listen to that, much of what they do is just getting alongside people, getting to know them, hearing their stories, and to be willing to share the love of God, whatever that looks like in that moment. And that's the same thing we're called to do, right? There are people all around. What are the opportunities God has placed in your life? People around you that you can love. Sometimes that's family, sometimes that's friends. We all live in a community where we go to the shops, where we go to restaurants to eat or cafe in the morning. How are we going to respond in those situations to share the love of God? As we close, just have two questions for us. As you think about your life, what are some ways that you're already finding to imitate Jesus' love in your family, church, and community? Right? We are already loving. If you know Christ, He's already been at work in you, then you will be loving in some ways. And so I don't want us to think about all the ways we're deficient right now. I want us to think of all the ways we're doing it well. Right? Do your friends know that you love them? Do you care for them? Are you, one of the ways we can show love is by serving. We have so many people, we recognized people earlier this morning who are serving here in church. What are ways in the wider community that you are helping? Are you, you know, someone who will just give somebody a smile just to brighten their day when you're at the shops or when the cash register person tells you, have a nice day. Thanks. You just walk away, or you smile. Thanks, you too. Just little things that we can do. Maybe you're already doing these things. And maybe you're already looking for opportunities. And as we talked about at the start, look at not just my family, my church, my local community. How are we doing this for the wider world? What are ways we can be more loving to the wider world? Maybe it's to support mission work going on already, financially or prayerfully. One of the things I was thinking of as I was doing that, I'm a bit of a news nerd, right? I like to read the news stories. I guess I'm a glutton for punishment because it's not very positive reading, but I like to know what's going on. Anybody else like that? Yeah. Yeah. But what if every news story that I heard, particularly the bad ones, what if I use that as an opportunity to pray into that situation? Right? Then I'm using something that I've already enjoyed doing, which is being aware of things going on. But then I'm using it to pray. And our prayer leaders on our prayer team are wonderful at bringing some of those things in the world and allowing us to pray together in unity for those things. But do that on a personal level as well. We talk about, oh, it'd be great for the war in Ukraine to finish, or the war in Iran. But we say those things, but we need to be praying for God to be at work in those. And so, how can we be loving the wider world? Maybe it's support a child through compassion or Baptist World Day. There's so many different ways we can be loving, not just to our local community, but to the world. And we've got some wonderful Baptist missionaries who are going out and doing these things, and we've been praying for them, supporting them in other ways. Maybe you would consider going on a short-term trip somewhere someday to support. That's a wonderful thing that you might be able to do to support some missionaries or some work somewhere. So just get you to think, what does it mean? What does love look like in your life, both here? How can we get involved in the work in the wider world? Now going to have a time of our one thing, my one thing. So for you to write down what's the one thing that maybe you learned today, or one thing you were challenged on, one question you have, one thing you liked, and then we'll give you that chance to write that down, and then we're going to share it with each other.